critique was the Hinduism of his day that had morphed into by his day, a very oppressive, white supremacist phenomenon. That's not my subject right at this moment. What I want to direct you to with this first, second century Buddhist sculpture, the point I want to make is this circumambulation, which is characteristic of certain Buddhism, actually derives from Hinduism. The circumambulation around a sacred object is a ancient Hindu practice. Why is that important? Well, circling around the Kaaba. Notice that not only is the circumambulation around a sacred object shared by both Hinduism and Islam, but you see the Buddhist priests are dressed in what in Islam is called ihram garb. The garbs are pretty similar. So a legitimate question can be raised: how do we account for these similarities? And they can be further enumerated. How does one account for these similarities? Well, if you are a Hindu nationalist, part of the Hindu right movement of India today, who in their political dispute with Pakistan and thus a party to the Hindu-Muslim conflicts in India, if you are such a Hindu nationalist who wants to rewrite Indian history to more bolster your claim of ownership of India proper, India and Pakistan, that area, the Indus Valley, ancient Indian civilization now located in what is now Pakistan, Muslim Pakistan. If you're a Hindu nationalist mad at these Muslims and you want to bolster your claim to be the true Indians, to be the true natives of the land, and those Muslims are invaders, and thus you're inclined to rewrite Indian history to make Aryans indigenous to India rather than invaders to India. If you are inclined, then you are likely inclined to also, like one of the poster boys for this brand of Hindu national scholarship, P.N. Oak. You want to account for these similarities by claiming that these indigenous Aryans who didn't invade India, but are native to India, and in fact responsible for India's civilization, not entering India late, but exited India and spread civilization across the planet, Vedic civilization across the planet, Aryan civilization across the planet, you will be inclined to account for these similarities by claiming that the Aryans went to Arabia, and Arabian society, Arabian culture, and Arabian religion is the offspring of those areas. Now, there's a sense in which that is true. Well, that last part. I have been documenting that Islam, as we have it today, is more the gift of Aryans than it is the revelation to Prophet Muhammad, the black Semite of Arabia. Most of what constitutes Islam today, theologically, culturally, legally, in terms of the legal system of Islam, intellectually, was brought to Islam by Aryans, Persians, who invaded the Islamic Ummah the same way their ancestors invaded the Indus Valley 2.5 millennia before them. So, if you're talking about the Muslim world today, and you cite parallels between Islam today and Hinduism, as our brother Dr. Phil Valentine does, well, you are right to do so. You are right to show modern Hindu, modern Aryan parallels with modern Islam. But the reason is not because some Aryans who were indigenous to India left India 4,000 years ago and took civilization to Arabia. And those germs later flourished as Islam. No, that's mythology. That's over-creativity. The data gives us every reason to understand the process very clearly. Islam of Prophet Muhammad was of a different animal than the Islam of the Muslim world today. Right. And the process by which the one morphed into the other is very similar to the process by which ancient Indic sacred science, or the sacred science of ancient black India, morphed into Brahmic Hinduism. The agents are the same. They're from the same ethnic group, Indo-Aryans. The process was remarkably similar, and the end result was pretty much the same. What I'll call the Aryanization of Islam and the Aryanization of Hinduism. So my current projects seek to reconstruct, shed light on pre-Aryanized Islam, Islam in its African, original African context, and pre-Aryanized Hinduism, Hinduism, an ancient Indian sacred science in its original African context. Now, in that regard, a very important article was published in 1939. Baron Rolf von Ehrenfeld, otherwise known as Umar von Ehrenfeld, died in 1980. He was an Australian scholar of social anthropology who lived in India from 1938 to 1969. Professor at the University of Madras. He, as a social anthropologist specializing in Indian anthropology, he would eventually convert to Islam and take the name Umar. his research, his anthropological research, his early anthropological research in India produced a very important article in 1930 that only by the grace of the ancestors that I stumbled upon, because it's not cited. Even though his insight is confirmed by a whole host of bodies of data today. The Baron's insight is profound. This particular article, published in Islamic Culture, 1939. The title of it, The Pre-Aryan Cultures of India and the Ethnological Background of Islam. Baron Numa was concerned with studying the relation between the pre-Aryan or Dravidian cultures of India to the ethnic background of Islamic culture. His social anthropological study gave him reason to believe that there is some ethnic relation between the backgrounds of ancient Indian culture and the matrix that produced Islam. The ethnic cultural matrix that produced Islam. And I'm not going to read all of that. I have all of this in my book, Egyptian Sacred Science in Islam. But his conclusions are remarkable, are important, and are key, in fact, to understanding why Buddhists, but before them, Hindus, circulate or circumambulate sacred objects in Islam garb the same way Muslims, and before them, so-called pre-Islamic black Arabs, circumambulated religious objects wearing ihram garb. And the same reason, and I discuss this in the book, don't discuss it now, but we can triangulate this. The same reason over in the Nile Valley. The Temple of Neith was circumambulated 7 times by priests of Ra. Why? Well, the why to this phenomenon, in particular, the Indic Islamic nexus, was provided by the insight of the Baron. His conclusion was that there was at least probable that close coherencies have been existing between the pre-Aryan cultures of India and the old Semitic ones of the Near East. There's been close coherencies between pre-Aryan Indic culture and ancient Arabic culture, we call it Old Semitic, as well as between the peoples who created the two civilizations. Indian civilization and Islamic civilization, the peoples ultimately responsible for producing them had close cultural coherencies. In fact, he's even more direct. Said the pre-Aryan cultural forces, those black Dravidians, that Brother Baba Ranoko documents for us in his wonderful work. The pre-Aryan cultural forces and the Islamic culture are heirs of the same cultural background, like two cousins of the same family who have since long forgotten that they are of common descent. Did y'all catch that?
Yes, sir.
For me, this insight is of critical importance. What is Baron Numa saying. What does